The air inside the Galactic Union's council chamber felt thick with tension. Alien leaders from across the galaxy sat in their ceremonial robes, their eyes fixed on the lone human standing at the far end of the room. Captain Darius Kane, renowned for his ruthless efficiency, known for having no mercy even when faced with a defenseless foe. Stories of his victories and brutality had spread far and wide, making humans feared across the galaxy. Silvera, an alien diplomat from a far-off world, stood nervously among her delegation. Her species had been devastated by a long, bitter war with an advanced, AI-controlled empire. They had come to plead for peace, to offer a solution that would ensure the survival of her people. Yet, despite her desperation, she couldn't shake the feeling that her visit to the humans' worship might be her last. As she looked around at the council chamber, she saw only cold eyes that reflected the fear and hatred her people had for humans. Darius Kane's reputation as a merciless warrior preceded him. The last ambassador to try negotiating with him had mysteriously disappeared. The whispers among the aliens were full of warnings. Never trust a human. They are nothing but killing machines. Silvera knew she had no choice but to try. The doors to the chamber slid open with a mechanical hiss, and Captain Kane entered, flanked by two heavily armed soldiers. His cold, calculating gaze swept across the room, making every alien present feel like prey. He walked to the center of the room, standing with a posture so stiff, it was as if the weight of his past was physically bearing down on him. His voice, deep and commanding, echoed through the chamber as he addressed the assembly. "I am here to hear what you have to say. But make no mistake, I don't waste my time on weak pleas." Silvera's heart raced, but she remained calm. She had studied Darius Kane's past, and she knew how dangerous it was to show any sign of fear. Her people's fate rested on her ability to remain strong. "We come in peace," Silvera began, her voice steady despite the storm of nerves inside her. "The war between our peoples has ravaged our world. We seek an alliance, a way to end this bloodshed. Our planet will die if this war continues. We are willing to offer a ceasefire in exchange for your help." The chamber fell silent. Darius didn't flinch. He simply stared at her, his gaze sharp and unfeeling. "You want peace?" he asked coldly. "Why should I offer it to you? Your people are weak, and your world is already as good as lost. What makes you think I care about your survival?" Silvera felt the weight of his words, but she refused to back down. "I'm not asking for mercy," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I'm asking for a chance. You are a leader of power. Help us, and we can work together to defeat the true threat to this galaxy, the AI empire that seeks to control us all." Darius paused, his expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like he wasn't even listening. Then, without warning, he turned to the council. "I'll be honest with you all," he said. "I don't trust aliens. Not any of you, but I can respect strength. Show me that you have it, and I'll listen." Silvera's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped for a more diplomatic answer, not this blunt demand for proof. But she couldn't afford to show weakness now. She stepped forward, locking eyes with him. "We have strength," she said, her voice unwavering. "I've seen it in my people. I'm here because I believe there's still hope. That's why I came to you. You are our last hope." The chamber buzzed with murmurs. But just as Silvera thought she might have lost him, Darius surprised her. His lips curled into the faintest of smiles, though it was a smile that carried no warmth. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said. "But words are cheap. Let's see if you're worth my time." To Silvera's shock, he stepped back and motioned toward the doors. "Come with me," he ordered. "We'll discuss this further in my quarters. Alone." The room froze. The delegates stared, their mouths open in disbelief. None of them had expected this. To go to the captain's private quarters, that was unheard of, especially for an alien diplomat. What kind of game was he playing? Was this a trap? Was he going to kill her, humiliate her, or worse? Silvera's pulse quickened, but she had no choice. She couldn't show fear. She couldn't back down. She had come this far, and her people needed her to stay strong. "I'll come," she said, her voice steady, though she could feel her knees shaking. Darius didn't wait for her to hesitate. He turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving Silvera and the others to follow. His soldiers flanked her, their presence adding to the oppressive atmosphere. Every step felt like a countdown to something she couldn't predict. The hallway was silent, the only sounds the echo of their footsteps. Silvera couldn't help but wonder what awaited her in Darius's quarters. She had seen his reputation, heard the stories of his merciless tactics, and yet here she was, walking into the lion's den willingly. When they reached his door, Darius motioned for the soldiers to stay outside. "This is between us," he said. The door slid open, revealing a room stark and functional. There were no luxuries, no signs of comfort, just a cold, metal table and chairs, a few relics from Earth, maps, books, and a collection of medals that seemed to tell the story of a man who had seen too much war. Silvera stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room, trying to make sense of the man she was now facing. He stood by the table, his back straight, his posture still as rigid as the reputation that preceded him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was deafening. Darius finally broke it. "Take a seat," he said, his voice as cold as ever. "Let's get to the point." Silvera hesitated for a moment, then sat down, her hands clasped in her lap. She knew this moment would define her people's future. Everything hinged on her ability to keep her composure. "I want to understand why you would risk your life for my people," she said, looking directly at him. "You've never trusted anyone, and yet here we are." Darius's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something in them, something other than coldness. He sat down across from her, his fingers tapping on the table in rhythm with his thoughts. "Because in the end, I'm not so different from you," he said quietly. "I've lost too much to the war, just like you have. But unlike you, I'm not afraid to do what's necessary to survive." Silvera felt her pulse race. The man she had thought was nothing but a heartless machine was opening up to her in ways she hadn't expected. There was a story behind those words, a story of pain and loss. She could feel it in the air, thick and heavy. Darius leaned forward, his voice low but intense. "I'll help you, but don't expect mercy. What I offer is the chance to fight, harder than you've ever fought before." Silvera's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't hesitate. "Then let's fight." Darius's eyes flickered with a strange approval. "Good," he said. "We'll see if you have what it takes." As they began to lay the groundwork for their uneasy alliance, Silvera couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would change everything. She was beginning to see that maybe, just maybe, there was more to humans than their reputation for ruthlessness. And in that moment, she found herself not only fighting for her people, but also beginning to understand the very man who would lead them to what could be the final battle of their lives. And yet, as the door closed behind them, Silvera couldn't help but wonder what was truly in store for her in Darius Kane's world. Silvera's heart raced as she entered Darius Kane's quarters. The door slid shut behind her with a soft hiss, sealing her in a space that felt more like a prison than a meeting room. She glanced around, taking in the cold, metallic walls and the sparse, utilitarian furnishings. There was no luxury here, no decoration. Everything in this room screamed function, efficiency, and military discipline. At first glance, Darius's quarters seemed to reflect the man himself, hard, disciplined, and unyielding. There were no plush chairs or soft lighting, just a stark table in the center of the room surrounded by metal chairs. On the far wall, a large monitor was displaying various data streams, but nothing that seemed to capture Darius's attention. Instead, he stood by the table, his arms crossed over his broad chest, his cold eyes fixed on her. Silvera felt a shiver run down her spine as she took a tentative step forward. She had heard stories about the human captain, stories that painted him as a merciless killer, a man who had crushed entire armies without so much as breaking a sweat. She had seen the look in his eyes during their brief exchange in the council chamber, and she had no doubt that the stories were true. But standing here, alone with him, Silvera felt a sense of unease, unlike anything she had ever known. There was a power in this room, an overwhelming, suffocating presence that she couldn't ignore. Darius broke the silence first, his deep voice cutting through the air. "Sit down," he commanded, gesturing to the chair across from him. His tone was firm, but there was something in it, a subtle force that made it clear he wasn't asking. He was telling. Silvera hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking nervously to the door behind her. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, she sat down, keeping her back straight and her posture as calm as possible. Despite the growing tension in her chest, she refused to let him see her fear. She had to maintain control, to prove that she was worthy of his attention. Darius didn't sit immediately. Instead, he moved to the side of the room and began to study a display screen on the wall. His fingers moved with precise, deliberate movements as he navigated through a series of complex data streams. The glow of the screen illuminated his face, casting shadows that made him appear even more imposing. Silvera couldn't help but watch him, mesmerized by the way he seemed to command the space around him. As she waited for him to speak, her mind raced with questions. Why had he brought her here? What did he want from her? Was he going to kill her, or worse, use her as leverage in some twisted power game? She had heard of humans being ruthless, but she hadn't expected this cold, calculating silence that stretched on, giving nothing away. Finally, Darius turned his attention back to her, his eyes narrowing slightly as he spoke. "You came to me because you think I can help you, but help doesn't come free. I don't offer mercy, and I don't make deals out of kindness. You'll earn whatever help you get, and you'll earn it by proving you're worthy of it." Silvera swallowed hard, her throat dry, as she tried to maintain her composure. "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling up inside her. "I didn't come here to beg. I came because I believe there's still hope for my people. If you help us, we can fight together. The AI empire threatens all of us. We all have something to lose." Darius stepped closer, his boots clicking sharply against the metal floor. He leaned in slightly, his eyes locking with hers, as if searching for any hint of weakness. "You think I care about the AI empire? You think I'll risk my people for yours? You've got a lot of nerve, alien." Silvera's heart skipped a beat, but she refused to back down. "I'm not asking you to risk anything. I'm asking for a chance. We've lost everything. I know you've lost too. But together, we can make sure we don't lose any more." For a moment, Darius said nothing. He simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he turned away and walked back to the table, his fingers tapping against its surface in a rhythmic pattern. The silence stretched on, and Silvera could feel her anxiety building. She had no idea what was going through his mind, and that uncertainty gnawed at her. "Tell me something," Darius said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Why should I believe you? Why should I believe anything you say? For all I know, you could be lying. You could be playing a game, trying to manipulate me into helping you. You know how many aliens have tried that with me." Silvera's eyes widened, but she quickly masked her surprise with a neutral expression. "I'm not lying," she said, her voice unwavering. "I'm here because I have no choice. My people are dying. If we don't fight back, we'll all be wiped out. I'm not asking for your trust. I'm asking for your help." Darius was silent for a long moment, and Silvera's patience began to wear thin. Just when she thought he might not respond, he spoke again. "You're lucky you're not dead right now," he said, his tone low and dangerous. "Most aliens who come to me don't get a second chance. They make their plea, and I either help them or I don't. But you've got guts. I'll give you that." Silvera's pulse quickened. Was this a sign that he was starting to consider her offer? Or was he just toying with her, playing some twisted game of cat and mouse? But guts aren't enough. Darius continued, his eyes locking onto hers once more. What I want to know is, do you have the will to fight? Are you ready to do whatever it takes to survive? Because if you're not, you're wasting my time. I'll do whatever it takes, Silvera said firmly, her voice resolute. We all will. We're ready to fight. We're ready to win. Darius seemed to consider this for a moment, his gaze never leaving hers. Then, without a word, he moved to the wall and pressed a button. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing a small, sleek weapon, a blaster unlike any Silvera had ever seen before. It was sharp, deadly, and designed for precision. You'll need to learn how to use this, he said, holding it out to her. If you want to survive in my world, you need to understand that weakness isn't tolerated. If you can't fight, you'll die. Silvera's eyes widened as she reached out to take the weapon. It was heavier than she expected, but she quickly adjusted, feeling its weight settle in her hand. She had been trained in the art of combat, but this was different. This was human technology, advanced, powerful, and deadly. As she held the blaster, Darius turned and walked to the window, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The AI Empire doesn't play by the rules, he said, his voice distant. They'll do whatever it takes to crush us. If we're going to win, we have to be willing to fight like they do. And that means no mercy, no hesitation. Silvera stood still, her mind racing as she processed his words. This was the man she had come to for help, a man who spoke of no mercy, no hesitation. But despite the darkness in his words, there was something in them that resonated with her. She had lost everything, her family, her planet, her people. And now, for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. She was beginning to understand Darius Kane, and she was starting to realize that perhaps his ruthlessness was the very thing they needed to survive. Silvera had spent what felt like hours in Darius Kane's quarters, trying to process the weight of the situation. She had walked into his room with nothing but hope and desperation, but now she was beginning to realize how little she truly knew about the man she was dealing with. His cold, calculating nature was unsettling, yet there was something in his demeanor that made her question everything she had been taught about humans. Darius didn't make small talk. He didn't waste words. After handing her the weapon, he had turned his attention back to the display screens in the room, once again focused on the ongoing war. Silvera had quietly observed him, not knowing what else to say. There was a strange tension in the air, a mix of uncertainty and anticipation. She didn't want to speak out of turn, but she also knew that time was slipping away. Her people couldn't afford to wait much longer. Finally, Darius broke the silence, his voice low and steady. You came here asking for help, but help comes with a price. I don't make alliances lightly, Silvera. If you want to fight alongside me, you need to prove that you're more than just a desperate alien looking for a way out. You need to show me that you can contribute to the cause. Silvera's heart skipped a beat. She had anticipated some sort of challenge, but this felt different. She had expected Darius to be pragmatic, but his words carried a deeper weight, almost as though he was testing her, pushing her to her limits. She didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. I understand, she replied, her voice firm. But if you want to make a real impact, we need to combine our strengths. Your people have the military power, and we have knowledge of the AI Empire's weaknesses. Together, we can strike at the heart of their control and weaken their grip on the galaxy. Darius looked at her, his eyes narrowing as he considered her words. He stepped closer, the air between them charged with an intensity that made Silvera's pulse race. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, his voice had the power to command a room. You want to destroy the AI Empire, huh? He said, his tone mocking. You think your people can be the key to that? You don't know what you're asking for. The AI is everywhere. They are more advanced than anything your people have ever faced. They'll wipe you out in an instant if you don't have a plan, a real one. Silvera stood tall, refusing to be intimidated by his words. She had seen the devastation caused by the AI empire, had witnessed firsthand the cruelty they imposed on her people. But she wasn't going to back down. She couldn't afford to. "We do have a plan," she said, her voice steady. "It's not just about brute force. It's about precision. The AI may be advanced, but they have weaknesses. Their overconfidence, their reliance on technology. It makes them vulnerable. We know how to strike at their core systems, at their communication networks. With your people's firepower and our intelligence, we can cripple them." Darius tilted his head, studying her with a calculating gaze. She could feel the weight of his scrutiny, like he was trying to peel away the layers of her character, looking for any sign of deception. But Silvera stood her ground, meeting his gaze with the same intensity. "What makes you think your plan will work?" he asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "What if the AI are more dangerous than you think? What if you're wrong?" "I'm not wrong," Silvera replied, her voice unwavering. "We've studied them for years. We know how they think, how they operate. Their artificial intelligence is powerful, yes, but it's also predictable. They rely too heavily on their systems, their data networks. If we can infiltrate their communications, we can turn their own technology against them." Darius was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. The silence hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating her with uncertainty. She had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. She was asking this man to trust her, someone he had just met, someone he barely knew. But she had no choice. The fate of her people depended on this. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," Darius said finally, breaking the silence. "But guts alone won't win this war. You need to understand what you're asking for. You're not just asking for help. You're asking for an alliance, a partnership between two very different groups. That kind of alliance isn't built on trust alone. It's built on results." Silvera swallowed, her throat dry. "And how do you suggest we build that trust?" Darius leaned in slightly, his eyes gleaming with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. "You prove your worth. You show me that you can pull your weight. You take action. I'm not in the business of wasting time, and I'm not going to waste resources on a mission that doesn't stand a chance of succeeding." For a moment, Silvera felt the weight of his words settle over her like a crushing burden. She had never been in a position like this before. The stakes had never been higher. But she refused to back down. She had come this far. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her choices now. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "I've seen what the AI can do. I know their strength, but I also know their weaknesses, and I'm not afraid to face them." Darius studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her every word, her every action. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right, Silvera. I'll give you a chance, but don't think for a second that this is a free ride. You'll need to prove yourself. And if you fail, I won't hesitate to cut ties and walk away." Silvera's heart pounded in her chest, but she held her composure. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The opportunity to prove that she wasn't just some helpless alien looking for a way out. She was a warrior, and she would fight for her people, no matter the cost. "I'll prove myself," she said, her voice unwavering. "I promise." Darius's gaze softened just slightly. "We'll see," he said, turning toward the wall once more, his fingers gliding across the controls. "Get ready. You're about to enter a world that's much more dangerous than anything you've ever known. If you want to survive, you'll need to learn fast." Silvera felt a surge of determination flood through her. She had made the right choice. Joining forces with Darius Kane, the ruthless human captain, was her only chance to save her people, and she was ready to fight for it. As the door to Darius's quarters slid open, revealing the vast expanse of the war room, Silvera stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for victory. And with Darius Kane by her side, she would see it through, no matter the cost. The sound of the ship's engines hummed in the background, a constant reminder of the danger that loomed ahead. Silvera stood beside Darius, her eyes fixed on the vast expanse of space outside the observation window. The galaxy was a beautiful, terrifying place, a place where survival was a daily battle, and the weak were swallowed whole by those who held power. The war against the AI was one such battle. But now, Silvera had made a decision. She had aligned herself with Darius Kane, a ruthless human who had shown her the true meaning of strength. As the battle approached, the weight of her choice became even more apparent. She had entered into a dangerous alliance, and now there was no turning back. The AI were relentless, and they would stop at nothing to crush her people. But with Darius by her side, Silvera believed they had a chance. The command deck was bustling with activity. Soldiers rushed to their stations, preparing for the upcoming assault. The ship was fully equipped with advanced weaponry and technology that Silvera had never seen before. She had always believed her people's technology to be superior, but now she realized how wrong she had been. Darius's people had weaponry that could turn the tide of any battle. It was both impressive and terrifying. Darius stood at the front of the deck, giving orders to his crew, his expression hard and determined. He was a man of action, not words. He didn't speak much, but when he did, everyone listened. Silvera observed him carefully, trying to understand what made him tick. She had been in many battles before, but this was different. She wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for an entire future. A sharp beeping sound broke through the silence, followed by an urgent voice over the comm system. "Captain Kane, we have incoming enemy ships. They're coming in fast, and their firepower is off the charts." Darius didn't flinch. His hand moved swiftly to the controls, his mind already calculating their next move. "All hands, prepare for battle. Get those shields up. I want the main cannons primed and ready to fire on my mark." Silvera felt her pulse quicken. The AI were here. The moment of truth had arrived. She had seen AI ships before, but never at this scale. The enemy fleet was massive, a formation of sleek, dark ships that seemed to absorb the light around them. They were fast, precise, and unrelenting. The AI had a reputation for overwhelming their enemies with sheer force, and this battle would be no different. Darius turned to Silvera, his eyes piercing through her with a cold intensity. "You wanted to fight. Now's your chance. Get to the gunner station. We're going to need all the firepower we can get." Silvera didn't hesitate. She knew her role now. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for the future of her people. She ran to the designated station, her heart pounding in her chest. The gunner station was a high-tech setup, with holographic displays and touch-sensitive panels that controlled the ship's weapons. She had trained on similar systems back home, but nothing compared to the firepower this ship had. "Focus, Silvera." Darius's voice crackled over the comm system, his tone unyielding. "Target the lead ship. We need to take them down first." Silvera's fingers flew over the controls, her mind focused entirely on the task at hand. She could feel the tension building as the enemy ships closed in on them, their weapons charging up for a deadly assault. The shields on their ship flickered briefly, indicating the sheer force of the incoming fire. The AI weren't holding back. "Shields holding at 75%, reported the tactical officer. "Not good enough," Darius muttered. "All cannons, fire at will." The ship's weapons fired in a synchronized barrage, the bright flashes of energy lighting up the darkness of space. Silvera watched as their first shot hit the lead AI ship, a massive explosion rippling through the hull. But the AI were quick to retaliate, their ships moving in a coordinated pattern that made them difficult to hit. Silvera's heart raced as she fired another round. This time, her shot hit its mark, sending another AI ship into a fiery explosion. But even as the enemy fleet began to lose ships, more kept appearing from the depths of space, an endless wave of death and destruction. "Captain, we can't hold them off much longer," the tactical officer reported. "There are too many of them." Darius's eyes never left the view screen as he issued another command. Change course, 45 degrees to starboard. I want to get behind them. We'll use the asteroid field as cover." Silvera's hands moved instinctively, her body reacting to Darius's orders without question. The ship veered sharply to the right, heading toward a dense field of asteroids that had once been a quiet, desolate part of space. Now, it was their only hope. The enemy fleet followed closely behind, unwilling to give up the chase. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a maze of rocks and debris that could either be their salvation or their doom. "We've got one shot at this," Darius said, his voice colder than ever. "Don't miss." Silvera steadied her breath and focused on the incoming AI ships. She could see them now, their sleek designs darting through the field with unnatural precision. It was as if they had no fear, no hesitation. But she knew that if they didn't act fast, they would be overwhelmed. The ship rocked violently as the AI opened fire once again. The shields flared brightly, absorbing most of the impact, but Silvera could hear the stress of the ship's frame groaning under the pressure. "Get ready," Darius barked. "Fire at my signal." Silvera lined up her shot, taking aim at the lead AI ship. She could see its weapons charging, could almost feel the heat of the oncoming fire, but she didn't flinch. She had no time for fear. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. Now, Darius's voice was sharp and commanding. Silvera fired. The shot cut through space, a brilliant streak of light that collided with the AI ship's engines. The explosion was enormous, sending shockwaves through the asteroid field. The AI ship faltered and then exploded, its fragments scattered across the void. But the battle wasn't over. More AI ships were closing in, and their weapons were locked and loaded. Silvera's hands shook slightly, but she kept her focus. This wasn't just about fighting, it was about survival. Darius's voice came through again, calm but urgent. "We need to finish this. I'm not giving up. We're taking them down, one way or another." The tension in the air was palpable. Silvera knew this was just the beginning. The AI were relentless, and the battle for survival was far from over. But with Darius at her side, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. For the first time, she believed that they could win. The ship's engines roared as they pushed forward, and Silvera prepared herself for the next wave. The battle was just beginning, and it was up to them to see it through. This was their fight, and they would not back down. The battle had raged on for hours, the ship shaking violently with every explosion that ripped through space. Darius Kane's crew had fought relentlessly, holding off the AI attackers with everything they had. But as the minutes turned into hours, the toll of war began to show. The once pristine command deck was now filled with the sounds of alarms, the dim lighting flickering intermittently as systems began to fail. Wounded soldiers limped through the halls, some carrying their comrades, others barely able to stand. The air was thick with tension and the unmistakable scent of burning metal. Silvera stood beside Darius in the war room, watching as tactical reports flooded in. They had successfully taken down several AI ships, but the enemy's forces seemed endless. Their weapons were powerful, and their ships fast. Every victory seemed to bring them closer to defeat, and Silvera couldn't shake the feeling that the war was taking more than just their resources. It was stealing their very humanity. Darius, as always, remained composed. His eyes flickered with determination, his face stoic. He never allowed emotions to show. But Silvera could sense the weight of the battle on him. The anger, the fear, the exhaustion. Even the most ruthless soldiers could not fight without cost, and Darius had been fighting long before she had even joined him. "How much longer can we hold them off?" Silvera asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her heart ached as she looked around at the faces of the crew, many of whom were too young to be in a war like this. Some of them looked to Darius for guidance, while others seemed lost in their own thoughts, haunted by the loss of comrades. Darius turned to her, his jaw tight. "We'll hold as long as we can. We don't have the luxury of giving up." She nodded, But the doubt in her chest only grew. She had seen the destruction firsthand. She had fought for survival on many fronts, but never like this. Never against an enemy who seemed to know no boundaries. The AI were relentless, efficient, and utterly merciless. It was a war that would break everyone involved. And Silvera wasn't sure they had the strength to finish it. As the minutes passed, more reports came in. Their shields were failing. The AI had adapted to their tactics. The crew's morale was slipping. Silvera knew what was coming next. The next wave of AI ships would hit hard, and they wouldn't be able to stop it. Darius paced the room, his mind calculating their next move. His fingers tapped anxiously on the table as he spoke to his officers. "We're going to need more time. If we can't take out their flagship, we're done. Our only option is to get close enough to disable their command center. We hit them hard. We take them down. It's our last shot." Silvera felt a chill run down her spine. She had seen Darius fight before, but this was different. There was something in his eyes now, something darker. It was a fire that burned, a fire that consumed everything in its path. It was a desire to win, to survive at all costs. But at what price? As Darius issued his orders, Silvera thought back to her people, her home, and the family she had lost. She had come to Darius for help, but now she realized just how far she had come from the world she knew. The more she fought alongside him, the more she found herself inextricably linked to his cause. She wasn't just fighting for her people anymore. She was fighting for him, for the future they could build together. And that made her realize just how deep her connection to him had grown. The door to the war room slid open, and a young officer entered, his face grim. "Captain Kane, we have casualties," he said, his voice shaky. "We lost more than 30 soldiers in the last engagement." Darius didn't react. His gaze remained cold, focused on the map of the battlefield. "Prepare a report on their status. We need to keep moving forward." The officer hesitated, then spoke again, his voice quieter. "Some of them were your men, sir. I think you should see this." Darius's eyes flickered with a brief flash of something, regret perhaps. But it was gone in an instant. "I'll be there." Silvera followed him as he walked down the narrow corridors of the ship, the sounds of battle growing fainter the further they went. They'd reached the med bay, where injured soldiers were being treated. The stench of blood and antiseptic filled the air, and the sight of so many wounded made her stomach churn. Darius stood silently at the foot of a bed, his gaze fixed on the soldier lying there. The man was unconscious, his face pale and battered, but there was something in his expression, a haunting stillness, that made Silvera's heart ache. "This is what we fight for," Darius murmured, his voice quiet. "This is what we lose." Silvera looked at the soldier, the weight of his sacrifice settling heavily in the room. She could see the man's young face, the way he had been so full of hope when he had first joined the crew. But now he was nothing more than another casualty of the war, another life lost in the endless struggle. She felt her throat tighten. She couldn't keep doing this. She couldn't keep watching people die for a cause that seemed doomed from the start. She had come here with hope, but now all she felt was despair. "Darius, we can't keep going like this," she said, her voice cracking. "How much more are we willing to lose? We're all just expendable. I don't know if I can keep fighting for this." Darius's eyes softened, though the hardness never fully left them. He placed a hand on her shoulder, the touch surprisingly gentle. "We don't have a choice, Silvera. We do what we must to survive. We fight because there's nothing else left. If we stop now, we lose everything." She nodded slowly, unable to find the words to argue. She knew he was right, but the cost of that survival was becoming too much to bear. She had seen so many deaths, so many faces she would never forget. As Darius turned to leave the med bay, Silvera lingered for a moment longer, her eyes lingering on the soldier's battered body. She couldn't help but wonder if their cause was worth the sacrifice, if it was all worth it in the end. Back on the command deck, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. The crew worked in silence, their faces pale, their eyes tired. No one spoke of their losses. No one spoke of the friends and comrades they had left behind. It was as though the war had numbed them all, stripping them of any hope or humanity they had once held. And yet, as Darius looked out at the stars, his determination never wavered. He had lost so much, more than anyone could understand, but he kept fighting, because in his heart, he knew that the only way to protect those he cared about was to keep going, no matter the cost. Silvera looked at him, her heart conflicted. She had come to admire his strength, his unwavering resolve, but now she could see the toll it had taken on him. The war was not just killing their bodies, it was killing their souls. And the hardest part, they weren't even close to the end yet. The final battle had begun. There was no turning back now. The AI forces had amassed their strongest fleet, and every ship in Darius's command had been sent to intercept them. The entire ship trembled under the weight of the incoming attack. The screens in the war room flickered with enemy ships moving closer, their weapons primed, ready to fire. The crew, weary from hours of fighting, braced themselves for what was to come. It was clear that this would be their last stand. Darius stood in the middle of the war room, his eyes fixed on the tactical map. His heart beat heavily in his chest, the gravity of the situation sinking in. He could feel the weight of the lives in his hands. His crew, his allies, the people who had followed him to the edge of death. They had all come so far, and now the enemy was at their doorstep. Silvera stood beside him, her gaze unwavering. The fire in her eyes had not dimmed. She had fought alongside Darius for so long, but now it was clear that the end was near. The costs of war were too high, but she was not afraid. She had come to terms with what was happening. The sacrifice had to be made. There was no other choice. Darius's voice was calm, but there was a raw edge to it. We can win this. We have to win this. For every person we've lost, for every soul we've sacrificed, we cannot let it be in vain. Silvera looked at him, her face unreadable. She knew what he was saying, but the truth hung heavy in the air. There was no guarantee they would make it out alive. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was that they fought to the very end, no matter the cost. The ship shook violently as the first blast hit. The lights flickered, alarms blaring as the shields buckled under the pressure. Darius's crew scrambled to their stations, trying to stabilize the ship and fire back at the incoming enemies. The AI forces were relentless, their ships swarming like a massive, unyielding storm. The sound of weapons fire filled the air, and the crew worked in perfect unison, a well-oiled machine. But it wasn't enough. Silvera's heart raced as she watched the tactical map. The AI flagship was getting closer, its weapons powered up, and the countdown was ticking down. They needed to destroy it. If they didn't, their chances of survival were slim. "Darius," she said, her voice tight with urgency, "we need to take down that flagship now. If we don't, they'll tear us apart." He didn't respond immediately. His eyes locked onto the enemy ship, his mind working out the calculations. "I'll need a volunteer team to board their flagship. We'll hit them from the inside. Disrupt their systems. It's the only way." Silvera's breath caught in her throat. She had known this moment would come, but it still hurt to hear it spoken aloud. It wasn't just a mission. It was a suicide run. They were asking for their best soldiers to give up their lives, to walk into the heart of the enemy's fire with little hope of survival. But Darius didn't hesitate. He was a leader, and he would never ask anyone to do something he wasn't willing to do himself. "I'll go," Silvera said firmly, stepping forward. Her voice was steady, but her heart was heavy. She had come to care for Darius in ways she hadn't imagined. She couldn't let him face this alone. "No," Darius replied sharply. "I need you here. If we don't stop them here, the rest of the ship will fall. I need you to lead the defense." Silvera met his gaze, her resolve hardening. "And I need you to survive. I'm going with you." Darius's eyes softened for a moment, but the decision had already been made. All right, but we do this together." With no more words, the two of them rushed to the launch bay. The rest of the team followed them, their faces grim but determined. These were the final moments. They knew the odds, but they were willing to face death head-on to give humanity a chance to survive. As the boarding team launched toward the AI flagship, the battle intensified. The crew aboard Darius's ship fought valiantly, their hands trembling with the knowledge that they might never see another day. Yet there was something powerful about their will to fight. They fought for each other, for their homes, for the memory of all those they had lost. The shuttle crashed into the AI flagship, its hull vibrating from the impact. Darius led the team out, weapons raised and ready. The cold metallic walls of the enemy ship loomed ahead, a symbol of the ruthlessness they had been battling all along. Silvera stood at his side, her heart pounding. She could feel the weight of the moment. This was it. They would either win or die trying. As they infiltrated the ship's corridors, they encountered resistance. The AI units were relentless, their cold, lifeless eyes fixed on the intruders. Darius and Silvera fought side by side, moving with precision, their bodies moving in sync as if they were one. The flashes of gunfire and the sound of clashing metal filled the corridors, but neither of them slowed down. There was no room for fear. Not now. Their team pushed forward, each step bringing them closer to the core of the ship. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse. Every time they thought they were safe, another wave of AI forces would appear, forcing them to fight for their lives. Darius's breathing was heavy, but he didn't falter. His eyes were fixed on the goal. He had always been the one to carry the burden of leadership, but now, as they drew closer to their final objective, he knew the ultimate sacrifice was inevitable. One of them would have to make the ultimate choice. Finally, they reached the AI's central control room, the heart of their operations. Darius and Silvera exchanged a glance, knowing what had to be done. The AI flagship would be crippled if they could disable its core, but that meant one of them had to stay behind to ensure the mission succeeded. "I'll stay," Silvera said, her voice quiet but resolute. Darius shook his head. "No, I'll do it. I'll make sure this mission is a success." But Silvera stepped forward, her hand resting on his arm. "You need to survive. I'm staying." And with those words, she activated the explosives that would destroy the core. As the countdown began, she kissed him quickly, her eyes filled with both sorrow and determination. There was no time for anything more. She knew what she had to do. "Goodbye, Darius," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the countdown. With one last look, she turned and ran for the control panel. Darius stood frozen for a moment, staring at her, his heart breaking. He had fought for this moment, fought for her, but now he realized that the cost of war was far greater than he had ever imagined. Silvera's sacrifice would be the turning point in the war. The explosion shook the ship, and the AI flagship began to break apart. Darius barely made it out in time, rushing back to the shuttle as the debris from the explosion filled the space around them. As they returned to their ship, Darius looked out at the stars, the weight of Silvera's sacrifice heavy in his chest. They had won, but at a great cost. And yet, in the wake of the destruction, there was hope. There was the chance for a new beginning, a chance to rebuild, to honor the memory of those who had given everything for the survival of humanity. As Darius looked to the future, he knew that the war had ended, but the journey was far from over. A new chapter was about to begin, and no matter the obstacles ahead, he would carry Silvera's memory with him always.